You're about to watch a demo of Gen Alpha 3, Runway's innovative text-to-video AI that is changing the film industry in real time. It'll be led by Chris, but I'll be returning to the stage following his presentation to ask him my and your burning questions. Please enjoy, and I'll see you soon.
Please welcome to the stage Cristóbal Valenzuela, CEO and co-founder of Runway.
Hey everyone. So the video you just saw is all generated by Runway. And today I want to show you a little bit more of the behind the scenes of how you can make those kind of videos. I'm sure many here have seen AI videos before, but many perhaps have not actually generated a video on their own. So hopefully this will contextualize a bit more how you can actually make videos today with Runway. And so I'll walk you through the basics of how to create videos with AI. And perhaps the most common one is, and the most well-known is text to video. So it's a very simple way of creating a video where you basically take a text prompt. I'm sure you've used some AI model before that requires a text prompt. And that text prompt gets interpreted by our model and then renders a video in any arbitrary length of duration of the video itself. And so the first video that I'll show here is basically that. It's text to video. I'll write in something, in this case, a prompt, and the videos that you see here are completely generated and are following the prompts that I gave the model. So close-ups of people, of actors, of specific shots, of animals. I can play with cinematic styles, with different characters, with infinite and perhaps impossible cameras like this, fly-throughs through skies, through clouds. These are all high-definition videos, and they do take like between 14 to 15 seconds to render, which is extremely fast and probably will go faster over time. Human emotion is one of the things that the model does really well, as well as like surreal movements, or shots like that, like a flying goat. All of that is generated. So all of that is driven by nothing more than a text prompt. But in filmmaking is really about making you feel something, making you attach yourself to a story, feel the emotional impact of a story, and text sometimes is not enough. And actually don't think text prompts are here to stay for a long time. I don't think you can make movies with text prompts. And so a lot of what we have been innovating has been on creating more control tools. And so I want to show you what other control tools you can have to make videos with Runway and with AI beyond just text prompts. And so another one that's very common these days is this idea of using an image as a reference. So that's a real photo of New York, and I can define the kind of movement and motion that I want. I can take an initial shot of a frame, a first frame, or a frame from an animated shot, or a frame for a moving car, and have the model kind of like predict what will happen next. And that's great because I can define the cinematography, the art direction, the style of the shot itself with much better control. I can use real images, I can use images I have, and I can play with the composition of those images in a much more better way than just text alone. And I can also do something like this, which I can take existing video and then render it with generated video. So the backgrounds of all the shots here are completely generated. And this might be similar to visual effects. Perhaps that's the most common way of referring to it. You take existing footage and you combine it with CGI videos to make effects basically like this. Now, the only difference is that this takes a couple of seconds to make. Other forms of control beyond text prompts include video. So in this case, I can input a video, an existing video that I have recorded of myself or anything in the set or anything that I have, and turn it around in a different style or in a different character or a different direction artistically. Again, with much better control. I can define camera movements in the way that I prefer. I can define much more action-driven elements or actors in ways that are much more concise or precise to my artistic or creative directions. And it's also just very fun to play with, specifically with these kind of videos. Animation has been one of the things that we've been investing a lot of time. Perhaps you know why, because it's extremely hard to make animation, extremely expensive, and these tools are here to basically take that cost a little bit down. And the last form of control that I want to show you is something of a kind of like a sneak peek of something we're working on that takes the idea of using a driver's or an actor's performance really to the next level. So you'll basically see two videos. You see a video on the left, that's a real video, that's a performance of an actor reading a script, and the video on the right is completely generated.
So let me get this straight. You came all the way down to the Department of Motor Vehicles and didn't bring your driver's license? Do I understand that correctly? You're going to have to go in the separate line for processing.
So the interesting part here is that you can maintain the performance, the emotion of the actor, and translate that almost in a real-time basis to the character on the left. And so that's a sneak peek of some of the ways you can generate video with Runway. And that's a small demo of Runway for today. Thank you.
All right, wasn't that cool? Another round of applause for Chris and Runway's Gen Alpha 3. Let's dig right in. Chris, thanks so much for being here and speaking with us today. I'm excited to have this conversation because it's incredible how far AI has come in the past several years in terms of being able to create really high quality videos. It wasn't so long ago that I remember, and probably you all do too, how AI struggled to even create realistic hands. And now I can't tell the difference. Chris, I know you have an art school background. I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about how you got at the intersection of AI and video and what it's been like to build a company during this time of really rapid innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I do have a background in art, and actually we got started with the company while being in art school. And we were fascinated at the time, this was like 8 years ago, but what neural networks were able to do. It was a breakthrough moment, I would say, mostly inspired by the last like 10 or 15 years. But I think we realized back then was that there wasn't really a lot of thought being put into how to use these models in creative avenues or creative directions. And so a lot of what we had to do early on was, well, how do we actually do that? And now it seems obvious. Now you can see these videos and they look amazing. It's really a form of creative expression and liberation that's empowering many creatives to do many interesting and amazing things. But 7 years ago, it was not really that the case. And many people thought, I think we were crazy when we showed them like what we're trying to do. And I think for us, over the last, I would say, year and a half, there's definitely been a change in both perception, industry-wide, in terms of what the models are able to do, and also challenges and opportunities. But I think for us, at least, it's never been that like today feels like extremely different from how it felt like, I guess, a couple of years ago, and probably won't be different as how we want to really feel in the next couple of years, because there's still a long way to go, and we're basically betting on that very long-term strategy. I've always think of the videos and the kind of things that AI can do these days as a new medium. For me, it's a new camera. And I keep saying this repeatedly because I think it perfectly encapsulates this idea of a medium of expression that will create a new art form. But it still feels we're in the very, very beginning of that new camera and the new art form. And so there's still a long way to develop.
So Runway AI is real, right? It's out there. I tried it today. And your tools have been used in major films like Everything Everywhere All at Once, music videos for artists like A$AP Rocky, TV programs like Stephen Colbert's The Late Show. And you recently closed a major deal with Lionsgate to build a custom model trained on their work. We also have an audience question I see about this. Great minds think alike. What does the Lionsgate deal mean for this industry, and how is the partnership going?
Yeah, so it's a one-of-a-kind deal that we announced very recently, where we have been working with the Lionsgate team to help them both, two things. One, understand how to best incorporate this into their production kind of like pipelines and workflows. And that means working directly with the talent, the editors, the VFX supervisors, helping them understand how this can empower them. And the second one is a lot of how you best use these models is by the data they use to train the models themselves. And so we've been training the models specifically with their catalog of data that they can use to better make the content that they need to make. So hopefully it's something we're working on for quite some time. And so finally being able to speak about it has been great. And I think it's a great step forward in the industry, recognizing that, I mean, cinema and Hollywood and filmmaking has always been about science and technology, and those two things really go hand in hand. And now's the time to have more of those conversations.
So there's a lot of competition in the area of AI video, right? We have OpenAI announcing Sora this year. Meta recently released its own text-to-video model. But these tools from the other companies aren't public yet in the same way that Runways are, right? Why do you think that is? How have you been able to get a quicker start? And how do you deal with the fact that these major companies with lots of resources are going after the same kind of use cases?
Well, I think we got to first start because we started working on this like 8 years ago. So I think it's been more of like we keep seeing more people kind of like understanding that this is worth spending time on. And I think when you create a category, when you create a market and we show that there's a lot of value in there, you'll have competition. I think it's impossible to think that if we succeed at building what we're building, you won't attract competitors to try to do exactly what you're doing. And I think we're seeing kind of like that. Now, there's a lot of research demos, and there's a few products. And so that's a good distinction to state. Research is great to highlight kind of possible applications and capabilities, but putting a product in the hands of like real artists and filmmakers is a whole different thing. And I think for us, it's always been around the latter, which is making sure that these models not only do the kind of stuff that you just saw, but also become really useful. And that means as a product builder, you need to understand what things need to be improved, what things need to be changed, and how you continuously improve those things more than just generating a video. Because again, if you ever try to make a video with text prompts just on its own, that's never going to actually work fully to the extent that you want as a creative. And so you need way more than just like single text prompts.
Yeah, that's actually related to another question I had, which is when you look at the output of something like a music video that was made in part with Runway, or even a feature-length film where the tools are being used, what % right now would you say of that final product is using the Runway technology?
It's a gradual like progression. There's use cases where we've seen like videos entirely made by Runway, or they're generated, and some others that are like mixing live action with animated with AI content. But truly, I think this goes back to like what I was speaking before, which is films and music videos and like feature films or short films have never been around how you make them. Technology takes a second like stage in that kind of like idea of films are really about stories. They're about making you feel something, right? And so you never watch a movie because how it was made. You watch a movie because it's a good story. And so eventually we want to make sure that if you want to make something, you can use our tools and our technology to help you get there. But at some point you won't have to tell or say to the world that you've used AI or you haven't used AI because it doesn't matter. And I think that's kind of the long-term aspect of where we want to go.
How are you and your customers measuring success? Do you have examples of where there's been big cost savings? Are you thinking about it in terms of different kinds of creativity it can unlock? How do you measure what is success with Runway?
I mean, success for us is that we help make more movies and we help tell more stories. We have our unofficial stated mission is that we want to, the best stories are yet to be told, and we want to make sure we can help tell those stories in the world. And so success for us is that more people can make more stories. If you have a budget of $100 million to make one movie, I think you should make 100 movies with that budget. And so how we measure success now, tactically, specifically as well, if you're starting or speaking with a screenwriter and they're spending hours and days and weeks trying to create a storyboard of their work, now they can just do it in like a few minutes. And so the iteration cycle becomes like extremely short. If you're working with a VFX artist and they're spending weeks and months iterating on rotoscoping or creating visual effects like they want to show you, like you shouldn't. You should hopefully make those in just a few seconds. And so those are just, the benefit is just time. You reduce the time you are spending on these rote, repetitive tasks, and you free that time for much more creative, liberating, and exciting things. And I think that's the ultimate measurement of success.
Any examples that you can share from partners that have been able to save money using Runway?
Yeah, so we're chatting with this screenwriter who's working on a new show. The first season was a hit. And what he does is like you're sitting there at the computer, you're writing, and you're kind of visualizing this world that you want to play between characters, right? But then there's a lot of decisions that you make in post or where you're shooting in set that were in regards to like the timing of the scenes and where you put characters. And so, and it was a surprise for me because I never thought about it, a use case like this before, where now while he's writing, he's able to render those stories and visualize them. So that helps himself edit the story better. And so the story doesn't have to wait to like production stage to be edited. It can actually be the story itself, and the script can be edited almost as he's writing itself because he's able to visualize it. And so that in itself, I think long term, if you compound, there's many processes and tasks where you can find tools and AI systems that can help streamline that in significant ways.
So I've talked to independent filmmakers who are really excited about AI for the reasons you just described, right? It can lower kind of the barrier to entry, save them time, money. Obviously, studios also see the potentials there. But there's also a lot of pushback, right? In the last 2 years, we've seen the major actors and writers' unions make this a key point of their negotiations over contracts, and just general, I think, fear about what this will mean for creative people. Will this replace their jobs or commoditize them? What do you make of that? What do you say to the artists who are scared of this technology?
I think a lot of the fear sometimes stem from like not having the experience or the chance of like understanding the technology fully. Again, these systems don't create movies on their own. They're not agents that just go around and make things that we suddenly like, right? They're tools. They're tools for humans, and they're tools for artists. And so you need to know how to leverage that tool. And if you think about the history of cinema, that's been basically the case forever. 150 years ago, the camera was invented, and the art world went in like revolution because they thought art was going to be dead. Why would you need to paint portraits if you can capture light with a camera? So we're dead. Like there's no more need for artists. That was actually the narrative going on around at the beginning of the century. And of course, that didn't happen. What actually happened was that filmmaking was very inspired by painting at the beginning, but also painting got a lot of inspiration from filmmaking and cameras, and painting itself liberated as a art practice beyond the portrait and like depictions of the things that were depicted at the time into a much more complex like kind of like field. And eventually filmmaking was evolved into a new art form. And many of the people that we have here in the city today, 150 years ago would have been impossible to imagine, to even think about having them as professionals and artists, as something you can do in your day to day. And so for me, this is similar, and that's why I come back to the analogy and metaphor of the camera. Because if you think of AI as a camera, you can take two positions. You can be, this is exactly how we've lived before, and this is a new medium, and you can take it and understand it and mold it, and there's a new language, and there's new things you need to discover. There's new artists going to be born out of this, there's new media. Or you can fear it, and you can think that this is the end of the world. I prefer the first one.
I'll take another audience question. What's the next frontier for training data? What happens when we reach the limits of human content and data to train on?
Well, that's a good question. It's hard to tell if there's ever going to be a limit, to be honest. We can keep capturing new data all the time. You can keep improving the models. I don't think we've hit like ceiling on the amount of data that you can ingest into the systems. There's so many new and like innovations from synthetic data, from like capturing data, where there are companies building like devices just to capture data around environments. I think it's still very early, and at least for us, we're training what we call world models. So world models is just another fancy way to say simulation. So you're trying to build these simulation systems. And simulation can have all sorts of different data points, from text, from video, from audio, from 3D. And so it's still very early, and I think we have a long way to go.
What are your biggest concerns? This is also from the audience and related to a question I have around, what are your biggest concerns about leveraging AI responsibly? And I especially want to ask about deepfakes, which is a big area of concern. We have an election coming up, right? What are the rules around that with Runway, and how do you think the industry should be handling that?
I think, again, we can look back at like other previous moments in like history where we've seen similar evolutions of technology. And even with, again, I'll repeat, but like with cameras, people were afraid that like both privacy will be like destroyed and people will be recording things that they shouldn't be recording. And the truth is that maybe that's the case, but we've collectively built norms around how to use a camera. right? What to shoot and what not. It's illegal to record people without their consent. So you can, as a society, come up with what are the rules and the norms that you should have when approaching a technology. And I think this is similar. This is a new technology. It's amazing. It's extremely useful. It's liberating. It's going to change a lot of things. But it's a technology. And we should think about it in the similar ways we've thought about it with other technologies, even the internet. It's an amazing place. Like, the internet has changed the world for good. Of course, there are things that are bad on the internet, but we've collectively agreed what are those things, and we put like restrictions on them. I think with AI, we should take a very similar approach, which is it's still very early. We should understand what is the scope of what we can do, and then have that kind of like mindset of like making sure that the norms and the regulations address the misuses, but don't focus too much on the innovation itself. Like, we don't need to stop innovation right now because, again, it's still too early.
Runway is primarily, a video tool platform right now, but does it have plans to extend into other areas? I see a question here about maybe gaming, interactive experiences.
So, and this maybe touches back on what I was saying before about like new media formats. We don't see ourselves as a video company. Like, that's perhaps what we're most well known for today, and the videos you're seeing are videos, right? But I think of those as pixels, so just moving pixels. And pixels can have many different like forms of being like consumed or used or created. And so if that's the case, and you consider also the additional kind of like idea that you're going to get to a point where you can generate like pixels on a real-time basis, then you're going to have something that doesn't feel like a film, that doesn't feel like moving pictures, and it doesn't feel like a video game either. It feels like something else. And I don't think we have the words to describe what that thing is, because we haven't experienced it yet. But imagine a world where you start watching something, and as you're watching, you're generating the next kind of like sequence of events. You can label that a video game. I think we are going to label that something else. And our goal is to get there, to build these models that can predict basically those frames and help you create that content in a real-time basis.
Will it be in the metaverse?
Maybe that's one way of describing it. I feel it will be something else. And people didn't have the word to describe cameras at the beginning of the century. They used to refer to them as mirrors with memories. And I think we're still using the language of filmmaking to describe this new thing, but we'll have to collectively figure out how we call it.
How do you handle the ownership of content? And I'm really curious also about, does that change for something like the Lionsgate partnership, where it's trained on their films, right? Versus me as a user, I sign up, I do something on Runway, make something. Who owns that?
I mean, you own it. You are a human creator using technology. So you can use a pen, you can use a paintbrush, you can use a computer, you can use Runway. Who's the creator of all those things? You, as a creator. I think that doesn't change that like argument, because you're still pretty much in control. I think the only time it changes is when you think of the systems as non-human entities, right? And I think that's another philosophical conversation, right? Where is AI able to own content? I don't think AI is able to own content. People are able to own content and copyright content themselves. And so it goes back to like thinking about this as a tool more than anything else.
So right now, if I make a video on Runway, I own the rights to that.
Of course, you made it.
Okay. Do you think audiences will enjoy AI-generated films as much as they do non-AI-generated movies?
I hope that at some point you won't have to make a distinction, right? Like when you watch David Fincher movie, it's full of CGI, and you don't think of that as a generated movie, right? It's a great movie, it's a great story, looks like a live action, and you just like it. You're never asking yourself, how did they make that shot that looks, and do I like that versus this one that was real or like, who cares? It's great. It's a great story. And it was greatly made. And so I hope that we get to a point where like you don't have to distinguish between how it was made. You just focus on the story itself, and AI becomes like another tool like anything else we have.
I want to get your prediction for the years to come in AI and film. When do you think we'll be seeing our first 100%, or let's say over 90% AI-generated movie that is either a box office hit or wins an Oscar?
Next year.
Next year. Okay, I'm going to hold you to that.
Our internal other goal is to win an Oscar. So as a toolmaker. So there's Academy Awards for achievements, for technical achievements, and I hope we can, again, if we help tell more stories, I think that's a good measure of success.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. That was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Before we go, we have a special treat, and it is going to be, actually, sorry, I'm going to invite Chris back on stage because he needs to talk about this a little bit. I will leave you in suspense for a special encore from Chris.
We're talking about movies.
That's right. Yes. We're talking about movies.
We've been, for the last 2 years, we've been running this film festival, both in New York and in LA, that basically highlights and celebrates artists who are at this new frontier. And so this year, we partnered with the Tribeca Film Festival, for example, to showcase some of the frontier-like films or filmmakers that are using AI to tell their stories. And so we're now working for next year. So if anyone here wants to learn more about that, now's the time to learn more about that festival. But we also have a few of the films to show, so you can get a sense of what real artists are using this technology for and how good those stories are.
Great. Potential Oscar nominees, right, for next year. All right, thanks so much.